At this time, you were playing with a super. Diana had blown up, and Russell had played in there, and Dan Fanley, a couple other guys before you, and she was pop stardom at that point in jazz. So how did you start to balance playing with a superstar road gig like that and then also continuing to write your own music?
Well, I'm not sure I even really thought of balancing anything. I mean, I was the way that all happened was quite sudden and fast. I had been working with John Clayton and Jeff Hamilton in their orchestra, become quite close with them, and Diana had come to do a show at the Hollywood Bowl, for which John Clayton was the musical director, in which the Clayton Hamilton Jazz Orchestra was the house orchestra during those summer jazz seasons for several years. So she came, and I had known her really since the beginning. I mean, I remember first meeting Russell and her at the old Local 47, probably around 1996 or 97, at a benefit for John Collins that we all went to. And these old benefits were unbelievable. If a musician was sick or needed help with bills, they would have these. Yeah. They would have these tributes, and so there was one for John Collins, who was not doing well, and Russell played, Diana played, Clayton Hamilton played, Teddy Edwards, Jimmy Smith, and Paul Humphrey, I remember. Anyway, yeah, that's just a tributary, but just to say that, like, I had met her, and she, at this particular Hollywood Bowl gig, she said, you know, I may have some things coming up that I'd be interested in you playing for. Would you be interested? And I said, well, of course, you know, certainly. And the very next day at Hollywood Bowl, Diana's manager, Steve, came up to me and said, Diana asked if you'd be interested in coming to do a live record with her in a couple of months in Paris. And I said, yeah, of course I would. And so we did that, and that was kind of one thing. And then there was a bit of a lag time, and I was doing my own thing. I was also teaching at UCLA at that time. I mean, I was really trying to kind of cobble together a life in music, whatever that meant. Teaching, gigs with my own group, playing with Clayton Hamilton, just as much as I could kind of get together. And I wasn't on the road at all, really, before that period. So I'd say several months after we recorded in Paris, Diana called me, and I didn't even think that record was out by that point yet. And she said, you know, I'd love it if you'd come on tour with me. I've asked John and Jeff if they'd come on tour with me, and I'd love it if you would. And so that was the first period, and you know, she was hitting it hard. I mean, Diana, during the period of like 2002 to 2014, really, was like on it. I mean, and so there were some years, so it sort of snowballed. So I didn't think of balancing anything. I just had a lot of energy, and I was young and super psyched and had a lot of adrenaline from being brought on the road and moving. So when I'd come home, I just still had a lot of energy, and I wanted to do things as much as I could. And so for me, it's all just part of one practice of making music. I was just glad to be out playing every night.
Hey, Anthony, how are you?
I'm so good. How are you, Perry? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. It's been such a pleasure to sit here and listen to you talk about your life and coming up in LA. I didn't know about the Bennington thing. That's really neat. And I knew you had New York experience as well. But yeah, I do have some questions, but I just also want to give you some much deserved praise. Thank you. So you're gonna have to sit through it.
Okay.
We're all big fans of your playing. I'll speak for myself, just saying that I think, like a lot of guitar players, I kind of first heard about you through Diana Krall's gig and those performances. But then, having moved from the Bay Area down to LA to study at SC, I was starting to know some musicians, guys like Matt Zebley and Matt Otto that played with you, Ferber, and they were kind of hipping me to your non-net stuff, which I love. It's just awesome. Power 9 is a really great record, and I really love that stuff of yours. But where I'm kind of going with this is seeing you develop your career over the years, whether it's the stuff you've done with Seasons or the new stuff with Frogtown or Songs and Photographs. It sets a really great example for guys of my generation and younger guys, because too often I think we've been told that if you want to be great at jazz, you have to just really focus on only that, you know. And even within the different styles of jazz, sometimes people say, oh, well, just focus on playing this way, or play modern, or play traditional. And I think you really kind of break open that notion. And you've brought so many wonderful influences into your music, and it hasn't, you know, hindered your ability to play jazz. You get a great sound out of that instrument, beautiful tones, swinging so hard, and it's just a great example. I want to just let you know that in case you haven't heard that enough from people. But
thank you. I appreciate
it's really nice to kind of see somebody's career expanding in this way, who can play straight ahead so well.
Yeah, I mean, I do well, you know, internally. When I know and I feel that there's nothing that I couldn't do. Like if I'm interested in making music in a certain way, or that appeals to me, or I mean, I just, as a listener to music, I listen to so many different forms of music, and I feel like I've so benefited from, you know, the really wide availability of recordings that we have now, so that I'm always just looking down different avenues, and it never felt, it would feel very confining, in other words, if I felt like there's a way that one is supposed to be in music. You know, like, this is how you're supposed to do it. You stay on that track, you do it. I mean, I think that works for certain people, or maybe it worked at a certain time, or maybe some people didn't even think about it that way. They just was the way it was, and maybe there wasn't as much awareness of how you could get to the goal by taking many different routes, but I just love the idea that, like, nothing is really off limits in terms of making art. I mean, we're artists. We make art.
Right.
And so the idea that don't go there, stay here, really concentrate. I love that idea. I mean, the other day I posted on Facebook an article about a guy in Pasadena who has an Italian grocery store, and he makes these sandwiches.
Yes.
And my caption for the article was, you know, do one thing and do it well. Like, I totally understand doing one thing and doing it well, but maybe the one thing is a bit broader, you know, so to be able to acknowledge that each of us is going to have to find that for ourselves, and then to define what that one thing is, and then make it, and that's worked well for me, you know.
It's really, it's beautiful. The music you're producing now, I want to talk a little bit about is really interesting to me, in addition to the stuff you were doing earlier on. But Frogtown and Songs and Photographs, I was recently listening to some of that stuff and reading some of the press releases you had on it, and I wanted just to dive in a little deeper on this aspect that I read, which is that maybe you reached a point with jazz, or like traditional jazz, that maybe wasn't satisfying something within you, and kind of just trying to talk about that, because I know you have this broad sense of your artistry, and I'm just curious what more you needed, you know, and what wasn't working for you.
Sure. To be real clear about it, or to try to find a way to really articulate that. As a listener and as a player, sometimes the experience of listening or playing jazz, I can find it very frustrating. I can find the experience of listening to a lot of soloing to be kind of frustrating. And that's something that I came to later, although I think even as a younger person, even in my teens, I think the kind of performances that I loved the most in jazz, the kind of soloing that I loved the most in jazz, the kind of recordings that I loved the most in jazz, had a real sense of kind of narrative or moving from the beginning to the middle to the end in a satisfying way. It brought me to the idea of songwriting as a conduit to creating a kind of a satisfying narrative in composing. I'm looking to kind of craft narratives or a sense of story or a sense of unfolding that songwriting started to become a really viable way for me to find that. And then it eventually influenced even the way that I approach performing instrumental music. And maybe I'd been doing it all along. But it's a sensibility that I've been trying over the last number of years to get in touch with, this sense of a real unfolding narrative in the music that I make. A great influence for me in that would be, for instrumental music, would be Bill Frisell. I think he really embodies that in terms of, to bring somebody who does it on guitar as well as composition.
Yeah.
I think Bill is just exemplary.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The way he uses his ideas, the way he uses fragments to create larger compositions. And I've talked with him about this, and it's, one thing he'll say is like, well, you just got to keep writing ideas, and then, you can put them together, and like, maybe it's a scrap from here. I love his little string quartet that he has with Eyvind Kang and Hank Roberts and Jenny Scheinman. And we talked a lot about how he'd use just very small fragments to then create a larger piece woven from these things. But something about the concentration of the ideas then creates something that carries forth the composition in a really satisfying way as a listener. So these are things that I'm always listening to: folk music, country music, hymns, old, I love field recordings. I love what happens when things get a little more concentrated. So
it's a really beautiful landscape that you've been creating on these last couple albums I'm familiar with. I also hear some Ry Cooder influence in there as well, and combined with the Frisell influence, but you're putting forth your own compositional style in there, your own way of playing in there, getting a beautiful sound out of the telly and the other instruments as well. So I just want to tell you, I'm a big fan of everything you're doing, and it's just something that I really admire as well, that you've been able to just create such a great vibe on the archtop and the hollow body, undeniably swinging, and then you can step outside of that and expand your artistry. I just think it's a great example to set for modern jazz guitar players, So.
Thank you. And I mean, I don't think I can overstate that enough. For me, it is really all one thing. I mean,
exactly.
The idea of swing and the idea of rhythm and the idea of the way you place what you're playing within the groove and within the foundation of the music, that just goes across everything that I love. And so I'm glad that it all feels of a piece to you as a listener, because that's
absolutely
what I'm trying to do,
Can I ask us just a specific question about sound, about getting the sound, especially on the box? We've all dealt a lot with just trying to get a good sound out of a hollow body, and something, especially part of New West, a lot of the music we're doing is just 3 hollow bodies up there. And what has your journey been like a little bit with just really trying to approach a hollow body guitar and archtop guitar and trying to get a sound out of it that you really identify with. Can you talk a little bit about your approach there? Maybe specifically where you pick, maybe your action,
Sure.
setups, some things like that.
Yeah, I mean, I've